So we'll start with panels now. Our first panel tackles a subject at the heart of modern business: policy, regulation, and uncertainty, shaping the future of business. Geopolitics is shifting. AI is advancing faster than we can regulate. For the chartered accountants, this is our new operating environment. The question is no longer how do we comply, it is how do we lead through this uncertainty.
To moderate this session, I would like to invite Mr. Naveen Mehta. Mr. Naveen Mehta is not only a chartered accountant but also a lawyer. He's the head of commercial contract at HCL Tech UK. With over 20 years of closing complex, high-value deals, he advises the EU AI Act, GDPR, and DORA. Let's welcome Mr. Naveen Mehta.
And on this panel, we have Baroness Verma, member of the House of Lords, former parliamentary under the Secretary of State, chair of the UN Women's National Committee UK. Her own story is a UK-India story. Born in Amritsar, arrived in Britain as a child, rose to the very top of the UK's public life. A huge, heartfelt welcome to Baroness Verma.
Over to you, Naveen and Baroness Verma.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We are really grateful to have Mrs. Beroness Sandeep Verma. How would you like me to address you for this session?
So you can choose BV, which might be a bit strange, or Sandy.
Sandy. I think Sandy will be the right thing. So first of all, again, thanks to everyone. I think today's topic is very pertinent in the current scenario where we are living. We are living in a very challenging environment. And if we have to describe today's world, I think it won't be wrong to say that it's a VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and unambiguous. I think if we are living in that world, every day a new tweet sends shockwaves in the market. Last few years have absolutely been unimaginable for many of us. But I think I won't go back. It's important for me to do a scene setting for the audience because they should know exactly where your expertise will help us to understand this criticality and navigate. So if we just take a few steps back, right? Last year, if you remember, the new administration comes into US and they release a new policy on tariff. That has absolutely done, a very different kind of consequence in the share market. And if you recall, there is a report from IMF which says that the global economy would be downfall by 0.3 to 0.5%. And if I have to translate those into dollar value, the impact is more than $1.4 trillion. Similarly, just a couple of months ago, an AI company in US launches a new co-work software which creates a bloodbath of more than $285 billion in a single day. And if we don't go back, just maybe 8 weeks ago, there is a missile attack few thousand miles away from us, which has put the entire world into energy crisis and chaos. So let me go to our panel guest. Sandy, if you look at this scenario, right, it's absolutely a business uncertain world. You have got such a great experience in business because you started your business at a very young age of 19 years. You have held very commendable position in the ministry. What do you think, how this world is different from what you had seen in early phase of your career?
So, first of all, thank you for having me here today. And Anil Agrawal, of course, was a masterclass of taking us through a journey. But he also very rightly raised some of the challenges. And I think every decade has a challenge. And what he's raised is some of the challenges he still faces as a big business, as a huge business, but still faces in India. So I think let's not get so pessimistic about everything because these cycles come. I mean, it's always a cyclical cycle. And I've probably in my life seen about 3 of them. And each time it's always been, how are we going to recover? The last one, of course, you will all remember was 2008, when we had the global economic downturn. Was it forecast? Was it foreseen? Were people like you sitting in this audience today not able to actually predict that some of those challenges would happen? And I think sometimes what we tend to do is become very comfortable, think that it's a small wave that will pass, and not be prepared. And one of the things that I listened to very carefully from Anil's opening comments this morning was resilience. How do we make economies resilient? How do we make sure that forecasting is much more based on history fact rather than predictability fact, where he himself has said, you chartered accountants can do a 10x, 50x, but it's on a prediction without any real reality to it. But if we roll back and look what's happened in the past on predictability, you actually recognize where you will make the next mistake. So I think some of it needs to be optimistic, that cyclical events happen, that chartered accountants need to actually have much more of a wider risk berth, because often entrepreneurs don't want to hear the risk, but they need to understand the risk, and they also need to understand resilience. Globally, I think we are going through a very big dynamic geopolitical change. And I think what you will find is the big emergers, India being one, but also in the South, where the African continent now, everybody wants to enter, including India, is where all the natural resources lie. So of course there is a beeline towards natural resources. So I think you'll see a shift going on. How do Indian companies manage that? And how do the accountancy companies, particularly, look at the risks, not just in when the next crisis happens, but sort of predictability, looking at it from history.
I think very well said. You talked about opportunity, you talked about being resilient. I think that's really appreciated and we all understand. I think I remember one quote from Stephen Covey, who once mentioned that if there is one thing which is certain in the business, that is uncertainty. And I think what you probably said was absolutely very, very helpful and insightful. So maybe here I will just move to my next question. I think you carry a very unique role because you have been at the intersection of both the business and the policymaker. So standing at that intersection, I'm sure when you wear both the hats, you know there must be some areas where there is a misunderstanding or mistrust between the business and the policy. What do you think is that key areas of mistrust, and were you able to overcome those when you had moved from business to policymaker?
So I think what uniquely I brought to the table was that experience of knowing what business needs, but also what policymakers need to... Look, creating regulation is the policymaker's job. Stifling commercial activity is not the policymaker's job. Today in the UK, the problems we have is a lot of the people who are in the government do not have business experiences. So I think we must look at how do we make that balance. Policy, of course, is there to protect. It's there to encourage, to create a safe environment. And the UK still remains one of the safest, most securest places to invest in, to run a business in. And as Anil said, he's never had any notifications at all in this country. And that's by and large because business tends to be very much, it adheres to the rules. And if the rules are there, business tends to see them through. What we can't do is stop business from doing what business is good at, and that is innovation, development of an economy, and policymakers have got to understand that. But it's also about looking at reflective regulation, what went on in the past, why did that not work, and what do we need to bring that to work. As a minister in energy and climate change, which was one of my departments, what I recognized was we needed a wholesale reform of the energy markets. And we led that. I led that in the House of Lords. The biggest shift of energy reform took place in 2012. And it helped bring new players in.
So like you said, and Mr. Anil also said, so long as you are on the right side of the path, there shouldn't be any problem whether you are on the business side or you are on the policymaker side.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. I think then I would like to pick up one next question, because the theme of our session today is more about regulation as well. If you look at the last few years, there has been lots of new regulations coming, whether it was GDPR, whether it was EU AI Act, and even DORA and beyond. But one common theme in all these regulations is that if there is a business who is a non-compliant, the fines, the penalties are extremely high. And those are ranging, for example, if I pick up EU AI Act, any business who is a non-compliant in EU AI Act with certain provision will have to pay a penalty of up to 7% of their global turnover. I think the question here would be, is there any lack of trust which the government or the policymaker thinks the business won't have? That's why these hefty penalties are coming on the way. Or do you think it might have a wrong impact on stifling the innovation, as you rightly mentioned? So where do you see that balance between innovation and regulation in the new world?
So look, there is a balance, but the balance has to come from both sides. I mean, currently, the tech companies are creating a lot of innovative products, but the regulatory frameworks don't always work in sync with protections for the public. So whilst you may see it as 7% of the global turnover, but just imagine how much of the global turnover those tech companies are actually earning from. And if you're putting the public's safety at risk, then you have to take some ownership. So I'm not a stifler of it. In fact, I'm a great advocate for AI and tech companies. But I also think that I have a responsibility as a legislator to make sure that I protect the public, that the AI world doesn't become so overwhelmingly powerful that there are no control mechanisms. And at this moment in time, there is still only a very small group of people that are actually in control of the vast number of AI tech platforms. And I think we need to make that balance. The other thing I think is that artificial intelligence in itself may be a good, but unless it's missing the social and the emotional part of intelligence, we are building ourselves up to a very dangerous future. And the final thing I would just say is, and I'm looking at this audience, and Anil said it, but I'm going to reinforce it. If there is no gender lens on the artificial intelligence, we are going to have the same biases that currently exist, but they will be magnified several times over because the control mechanisms aren't there. When you had your lineup here earlier on, I mean, apart from Mrs. Fernandez, there was no other female here. And I think optically, when you are doing these events, it's really, really important that it reflects the wider population, given 51% of the world's population are female.
So essentially you are saying it is about having a fine balance between the trust and the regulation. Absolutely very valid. I think then maybe I would just come to one very important question, because I would just like to mention again a very famous quote from Peter Drucker. What he said was, the most dangerous thing in the time of turbulence is not the turbulence, but it's the act, how you react to it, whether you act a different way of working or from the past lens. I think keeping in that mind, maybe my last question to you would be, what would you suggest to the leaders and the finance professionals in this room, that how should they be open, or how should they deal with this new uncertain world? What would be your piece of advice to our people?
So my advice to everybody is good leadership starts from you. If you can't believe in yourself, then it doesn't matter what you say on a platform, because nobody else will believe you. And we always look at uncertainty as problematic. I actually feel uncertainty offers us great opportunities. And we need to be able to encapsulate the opportunities, Learning from the past, of course, allows us 2020 vision backwards. But what we need to do is to use the 2020 vision from hindsight and actually put it to going and building greater, more resilience, but also greater predictability of where we want to go. But I think innovators and entrepreneurs, what they want is to make sure that the people around them, so people like yourselves, actually are moving in the same fast lane as the entrepreneur. The entrepreneur isn't a money maker. The entrepreneur wants to make money. He wants to be able to utilize that money to grow and build other companies. But if the CEA is in the overly risk-averse position in the middle lane, the entrepreneur will get stifled. So I think there is a balance that always has to be made. But I do genuinely believe that I'm an entrepreneur by background. You know, I started my first business 19. You know, I chair, and I'm still involved in business. In fact, Anil was talking about mining and big infrastructure projects. I'm involved in many of those in Africa even today. But I think that the wise thing for all of us would be to take the sort of learnings of past crises, but make sure that we are building in, factoring that if we don't have the unintended consequences measured in, we will make the same mistakes. And sadly, if you keep doing the same thing over and over again, all you're going to do is make the same mistakes over and over again. So to all the CEAs sitting in here, actually, you have got a big job. Mr. Khandelwal said it earlier. You know, you make businesses, you break businesses. Actually, your job is to make sure that you are really at the forefront of supporting and encouraging, but making sure you are highlighting the risks that are on the way.
So thank you so much. I think essentially what you are saying is that uncertainty you can't avoid, but you have to anticipate it, be prepared, and just face on the top of it with full resilience and confidence. So we are very grateful to you, Sandy, for your insightful, very encouraging comments, and we really are grateful to you. Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you.